New motors for touring cars 2018. I was hoping to test about 3 new motors that are just coming out, but 2 are delayed. But one new one we'll have a look at is this one. It's made by Arrowmax, their first motor that they've brought out, and it's a whole range under the name Dash. Arrowmax are well known for making high quality tools, very well made. They do lots of aluminium machining, so you'd expect this to be made very well indeed. Available in complete range of modifieds up to 21.5, so I'm going to have a look at this 13.5. Initially through the window it looks interesting with all modern cutouts and nice detailing and everything. Now just before we look at that, there were 2 other motors I did want to look at. The new Reedy Power S+Plus, which looks like a big step forward for them with their motors, with lots of information about what they've done. Thin leg stators, short wire lengths, high strength rotors, all the usual stuff. That looks good. A big cutout for cooling vents here. Nice solid bent over tags for the connections, which pass the current very well. And this other one, Orca, previous Orca wasn't so good, but this one's a completely new design called the Blitzream. Again, a complete new design of cutouts for cooling and exposed wires. One thing, they've got the different type of tags here, it's like a circuit board with heavy plated contacts both sides. I've got some information on here as well about all the usual stuff, lightweight design, low resistance, etc. But one thing they do say is that they've got, they call it a double collector. It doesn't say on here, but at the front, this connection here, which connects the 3 windings together on a large plate on most the motors, they put 2 of them together and selling that as a feature, but I don't think there's any resistance lost through that big plate as a one plate. There is a bit of room, so they decided to put 2 in. Adds a tiny bit of weight. I don't think it will improve the cooling or the performance, but it's a selling feature. Anyway, I haven't got hold of those 2, but that's what they look like. They look interesting, and when I get them I shall check them out. So back to the Arrowmax. Comes in this fancy box, of course a very professional company. Made where, not sure, probably says somewhere, might be made Korea, it doesn't, can't see, made in, no, it's made in Taiwan. So opening it up, you've got the motor. One thing I noticed, you've got a nice little short flexible lead, which is nice, sensor lead. And another thing I noticed in here is that they give you some optional alloy screws, as they make a lot of alloy stuff, tools and that. It probably wasn't too difficult for them to machine these nice gold alloy screws, free included. Pulling the motor out initially, it looks very nicely made. The front's good, open vents. There's the collector I was talking about, big solid collector. The wires are connected to, I don't see why you'd need 2 of them. There is a gap. The back all nicely machined. Dash, R-tune 13.5, nice scale, easy to read. Little black pointer there. Those are the tags. That's a circuit board type of design, but it looks like it's heavily plated. The exposed stator laminations. But then one thing I noticed that I don't like, suddenly I see there's a big plastic former covering the wires front and back. So they've got these cooling holes, and then they block them off with some sort of big plastic part here and here, black, which means no air can get in. The only air cooling is going to be on the can, and on the laminations, no air flowing around the wires. I'm not sure why they've done that. That's a really negative thing. The rotor's got nice clear etching on it, RSS 125, and it's also got a hole indent on the end. Shimmed nicely, slight, could be a little tighter, but at least it's not too tight, which some are. So we take it apart. I can measure the resistances, we can measure the sizes, we measure the Gauss, and we can test it on the tester for kV, and we'll take it apart and see what's going on with these big plastic parts that they've put in there. Can record all the results on a chart and compare it to previous class leading motors such as the R1, much more, etc. Now the previous, let's do the weight, shall we? All these motors boast that they are lightweight. Much more I recorded previously as about 151 grams. So let's have a look at this one. Well, hardly lightweight. It's 164.9 grams, which is significantly heavier than the other motors. Now, previously I'd recorded the R1 153, much more 151. Now we've got the Arrowmax 165. These were 13.5 turn motors, same. So, quite heavy. Now I can measure the internal, the resistance of the windings, which is very important. We know that the R1 was a class leader at 0.025 ohms. A typical reading is 0.027 and 0.026 if you're lucky. Again, winding resistance 0.027, 0.028, which suggests that I haven't used the tightest of windings. Testing the kV for comparison purposes at 6 amps, 3676. That is low, and 28,000 revs. Okay, let's check the timing. Average of 47, 46, 49, 47. The centre board is not too bad, not the best we've seen, but it's not miles out. So it's not particularly revvy, so once we test the Gauss of the rotor, we'll see if it's going to have lots of bottom end torque. Taking the motor apart, it's very unusual. You undo the 3 front screws and you can pull the back off, which has the sensor board, which looks typical. It was used on many with a clamping plate and screws. But this part is all made out of one piece of aluminium. The whole case, the front and the side. They machined it out of one piece. And they've then pushed the whole of the stator. Has been forced in to be a tight fit, so it doesn't actually come apart. So you've got the end, this thick board here with the wires soldered on. You can see inside, you can see the windings and a tiny gap of where you can just see where a little bit of air can get through, and same at the front. You can just see the windings just through little holes. But this big plastic part here, well, it's what they've done is they've used it to help production of winding. The plastic wraps all the way round, inside and outside, and then the wires can go round and round the plastic part quite quickly without them. When you don't have any plastic part and you're winding directly onto the stator laminations, you run the risk of cutting through the wire and or making them messy all over the place. I don't know whether they've got some automatic process, but this big plastic part has added weight, and possibly they had to use a thinner wire. I'm not sure, can't really measure the wire, but it doesn't come apart. You can't remove the plastic part, so that's the design. And the aluminium is very thick. It's probably added to the weight as well. The screws, they're very tight. If you want to change them, you have to unwind them. They're sort of catching on the plastic. I think you've got to unwind them all the way out. So not many parts, but heavy. And rotor. Taken the rotor out of the dash. It's got dash DA730003 engraved on there. Let's just measure the Gauss. 1446. Well, it's a very well made rotor with north and south poles exactly the same. We know 1450 is good for a touring car on larger tracks. Small tracks and indoors you probably go for 1500 these days, but at least it's not weak, so it will give good torque even though the revs are a bit low. I'm measuring the rotor, the magnetic part of the rotor. They're tending to go slightly longer now to get a better performance. 24.25. Diameter you would expect to be 12.48. Measuring the stator, it's 19.7. About 19.75. There's always some small variation. 19.7. No, 19.73. Conclusions. Well, very pretty on the outside, not so pretty on the inside. Good effort, I think, but I think they're a step behind of the new motors, and certainly are not as good as the R1 and other motors such as the much more Phantom version 3, the Motive, and also these new ones that are coming out, the Reedy and the Orca. Look like they are going to be good as well. So nice looking. Unfortunately it doesn't quite live up to the performance we were hoping for.